Never. There we go. Okay, welcome everyone. Excited to be with you on Thursday as we do. I'm Joel and I'm here with my fellow co-conspirator, Tim at RevThink. Let me stop my screen share so you can see our, I was going to say lovely faces, but no, we're not going to go that far, Tim.
Don't go that far.
All right, good to be with you all. Welcome to this week's edition of the Weekly Briefing, brought to you by your friends at RevThink. For those of you that are members of our community at RevCommunity, welcome. If you're not a member, of course, we invite you to apply and become one. Tim, this is that time of the week where we always stop and say, what's going on? What's the latest trend? What's the hot button issue? And this week we're in the middle of our Producer Masterclass. Super exciting to have kicked that thing off. And so we said, hey, let's talk about some very relevant stuff that are on people's minds right now that we're talking about producing and what it looks like and in the trenches. So we're going to share some producer hacks. Are you excited?
I'm excited. I'll say this, we did a little Q&A session this morning, like a group homework session. And a few of you business owners are very lucky business owners to have the producers that I was listening to, the questions that they're asking, what they're intrigued about. There's some great thinkers and processors out there. So to be in the producer mindset and be processing what's happening and being encouraging in this space, it's going to be fun for the next few weeks with the crowd that we're doing it. And then obviously here on the Weekly Briefing to talk about it more is great.
Well, here's what you and I had to do, right? When we were mapping out the 4-week journey, we had all these ideas and we had to unfortunately whittle it down to what can we cover in 4 weeks. And one of the things that sadly fell by the wayside, because it's one of my favorite things, is I call them producer hacks, but it's really this bedside manner, this posture that great producers possess in how they handle clients, right? Very deftly get their way and find a way to win, even when other producers or the owner might lose if they were in the same situation. So I was gonna maybe challenge you because you have way more producer experience than I do. I've got a few hacks that I only learned from working with great producers, but you were a producer. So if I put you on the spot, I am kind of curious to know, like let's just go maybe to one of the most basic, this is where we all live. I'm the client, I call you up and I go, Tim, the spot's looking great. I just saw the latest cut, but have we thought about, I'd love to see if we could change the scope, redirect, go off brief, like whatever that request is. And I'm just curious, because I think you have a bedside manner approach that you would follow. And I think it's similar to mine, but how would you navigate that conversation from the producer standpoint?
Yeah, great. The first thing that pops in my mind with the scenario you gave me is, I know for certain I'm not going to negotiate in that exact moment. Right? I often feel like when somebody wants to give you something, you're supposed to take it first. And they're not going to listen to you until you've received what they're giving you. So when a client is saying to you, hey, I have an idea, I know we're about to deliver, but let's change everything. You have to have enough respect for what they're actually asking for to listen through the process and be willing to accept it. Once they feel like they've planted that firmly in you, and then you've processed it, then they're willing to take feedback from that. So if you said to me, I'd say, sure, I think we can definitely consider that. Let me just understand what exactly we're talking about. So you want to change everything, not just a few items, right? Like you wanted to change the whole thing.
Right.
And we're still trying to meet tomorrow's deadline. Is that what we're trying to do? So if that's the case, then I'm gonna have to think about a few things and talk to a few folks, but I get what you're trying to accomplish, understand what's going on. Let me just think about that. So right now, when I had that conversation, I've taken the burden away from my client and they gave it to me. And when I did that, now I'm in control. Right? Because they're no longer have the burden. I've accepted the burden on their behalf. And I say, let me take that burden forward and see what I can do with it.
Wow.
I feel like then when I call them back, they're willing to accept the response where I say, okay, I've processed it. And when we've thought through it, our challenges are, you're asking to change everything and we're almost done. So we have to make some choices, which I'll tell you the choices I would make, but I'd also consider what your priorities are before we finalize the choices. First choice is, we have to miss our deadline, you have to pay us twice as much money. But if you're willing to do that, then we can easily throw away everything and start over. If we're not willing to do that, then we have to start paring down what the real problem you're trying to solve, and to make sure that we're not missing the priority path. That client now is engaged with me. I've partnered with them to navigate through this problem solving and accepting priorities and values on top of the decisions.
So this is actually really fun because I know you well, but I've actually never heard you process this specific method in this way. And here's what I'm feeling. Okay, so if I'm your client, what I first of all noticed was you weren't awkward in the slightest bit. Because what we know is, as a producer, this conversation is really only awkward if you're awkward. Mm-hmm. I'm the client and I'm like, hey, I want what I want. And can we do this? And what's interesting is if your initial response had been like, well, guess what that message sends? What that message sends is, I'm already against you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm already
right. And resistance and friction go together, don't they? Yeah. We want to get rid of the resistance and friction. Yeah.
Right. So the fact that you were very receptive allows me to be heard. And then I also heard like part 2 of that was what I would call appealing to the better angels of our nature. This figure of speech, meaning,
that's a great one.
Right? Like, so you want to change the scope, or you want to go off brief, or you want to miss the deadline. Is that what I'm hearing you say? Like, I just want to really understand what you're saying, because that's an appeal to the person's sense of reasonableness, fairness. We had a plan. You want to go off the plan. Am I hearing you correctly? And that gives that client an opportunity to realize, oh, wait a minute, maybe there's a smarter person in the room here called Tim, or my producer, and there's more to consider here than simply, I want to change it from blue to green, or I want to change from dogs to cats, or whatever is in the spot. So is that a moment where you then go to your team and there's some sort of an actual conversation so that when you come back to that client and say, here's some solutions?
Yeah, there's definitely a chain of command that I want to process this through. So sometimes I know there's no way in hell we're going to do that. Right from the very beginning, like, it's just never going to work. I know who you are as a client. I know what my team is. I already know the answer is no, but it doesn't need I have to express that, vocalize it, or even try to convince them. So that's at first. Again, like, if I accept it, then at least they know when I say there's no way we can do it, they know that they've unloaded everything before I actually make that value decision for them. So I just want it all out. I have this idea of like, they have to empty the entire glass of bad things before I can put good things in there. Because when you mix good things with bad, it still remains bad, right? So I want the client to do that. But the chain of command I have now too is, I'm a producer, I have to protect the company and the budget. So I know those roles and responsibilities. By the way, I've established them from the very beginning of a project. I did a budget, I did a schedule, I did a brief. We had that very clearly lined out. So my job really is to stay on task that I was hired to do, and of course, protect the needs and the values of the business. But I also need to understand the relationships that we have in the business. So is it good to lose in the short term to gain in the long term? Sometimes that's a very valuable play. And so the compromise there is good. Also the creative people. Am I going to put extra pressure on somebody? Who is my creative partner? Can they handle those changes? Is this the right time to do those changes? We might agree with the changes. We might be willing to accept those changes. We might even love those changes. You can finance those changes, but if I don't have time to do them, the answer is still no. So I need to be able to process with my team to make sure I'm on the right priorities, and we don't want to give up something else to make this happen. So sometimes I know the answer is no. I don't have to go very far. I'll just double check. Hey, just so we all know, we're not changing everything, right? Because we're delivering tomorrow. And sometimes I say, hey, this might be the chance because we also hate it. and we can get them to finance it, and it'll be better for our reel. And sure, it'll be a little bit more pressure over the weekend, but all those desires that we have and all the desires that they have will be a better formula, and we'll blame them. They'll pay for it. We'll get better results. So that, I think I consider that kind of strategy in that process when I'm making that decision and verifying, where do we go from here?
Oh, I'm laughing because that is like a true, what is it? Is it jujitsu? What's the sport where
Totally
you the enemy's weight against them? Is that the one where, oh shoot.
Yeah, we can ask Nico. I think he's a jiu-jitsu guy.
Judo, Aikido, one of those.
Judo.
Okay,
Yeah.
Nico straightened this out. I think in jiu-jitsu, because in a way that request, like you just said, it might be an opportunity, because I definitely many times have been in the situation where the project really isn't that great, and their idea is actually pretty awesome to make this better. Let's use their own weight against them to get what we want, called make the project better and get more money, and maybe if need be, the deadline extended, and seize this moment.
Yeah, crazy. If you get really good at it, you can actually create the moments that they push back. They believe it's their choice, and you're getting more money and better results that you couldn't get in a situation. So there are positions you can take throughout a project to weigh the decisions closer to them realizing they should change everything. And then they believe they thought of it, not you. So that's when you get, those are those Jedi mind tricks that people say that I do best. Like, those are the moments.
Right. These are not the droids you're looking for. These aren't the droids we're looking for.
This is not the project you wanted.
Yeah.
You definitely want to give us more money.
You want to give us more money. You don't want to change the creative in any bad ways, only in good ways,
No.
et cetera, et
You're
cetera.
only going to write thank you notes to me when we're done. Yeah.
Well, I'll maybe amplify on something else I heard you saying. I think I heard you saying that when those requests come in, you go through those steps, right? You had this, you're not awkward. You have this appeal to the better angels of their nature. You get with your team, you process that, you come back. And when you come back, even if the answer is, well, I can't do that, but here are two ways forward. We can do A, which is this, or we can do B, which is that. A might be, shift the scope, change this, remove this deliverable to make it all happen, whatever. And then B might be, if we can get an overage, we can bring in some new resources and they can work all night and get it done. What's interesting when that happens is, if I'm your client, often what's going to happen is I'm going to hear option A and option B, and I'm going to say, no, that doesn't work. And no, that doesn't work. But guess what? Who said no? Right? I made a request of you. Did you say no? No, you've now put me in the position where I'm the one that has to say no. And therefore I might say, well, A is not going to work, B is not going to work. So I guess we should just stick to the plan. And now you just won again.
Yeah, you might want to pull a Henry Ford on them when he said, you can have any color car you want as long as it's black, right? It's the same idea here as we say, hey, how do we have a conversation with our clients saying, we can do all of these changes as long as we don't do any of those changes, right? That's the way we want them to understand the position they're up against. But they are the ones that really are starting to negotiate against you. So here's a tricky situation, the one that you just presented, because some people, they're doing a job, and now I've backed up them up against the wall.
Yeah.
So now they're fighting for their own position in their own company. They might have messed up or misexpressed something or feel the pressure internally, and they have to find a scapegoat. So they could become a bully. They can start trying to nitpick and find little things that we did wrong. They can start finding angles. They can swear that they never work with us again. Those situations come too, and those are the ones we're often afraid of when we say no, is that we might have just triggered something. And it's all fair. Like, anyone in a position backed up against the wall, they're going to fight back. And that happens here. There's a lot of pressure in a lot of situations with clients and clients, and millions of dollars on the line. So in those scenarios, we also have to be able to listen through what the real issue then is, right? And what I've learned to is accept responsibility where things haven't gone right. So if they're trying to fire arrows at you, imagine turn those arrows into mushrooms. or marshmallows, even better. Put arrows in your marshmallows, say like, no, I get that you just triggered something. You're trying to trigger something back to me, but it doesn't mean it has to hurt me. So they can say, no, we have to change it. Because remember 3 weeks ago when you guys made it red and we needed it to be green. And now that we're here, we realize we should have never accepted that change. And you can say like, no, you're absolutely right, right? In that situation, that's what we're up against then. And now that it's been a couple of weeks, we're up against a totally different situation. It's just different. We've played it out in this scenario. And I recognize where we are and I recognize the differences. But at least we've all been in it together. You accept that we were in it together. So we're also here together. So the problems that you're having and the pressure you feel, I'm willing to accept that pressure with you, but it doesn't mean we're going to go crazy. We're going to lose all of our money or you're going to lose your job. There has to be an exit plan. And that's what you're looking for now is that creative exit plan that both sides don't have to blame each other. And that compromise really is protecting something else than the project. And again, so some of those outcomes and strategies might be, let's lose now or lose on this point and gain on this point, or lose on this project and gain another project, or really realize that ultimately I have a cancellation clause in my project. And if you really aren't a very good client and this isn't going to work out from now on, I say, you know what? It seems like we're done with you. This project seems finished with what we can possibly do with what you've given us. We're going to exercise our exit clause. And now what that means is you're going to cover all of our expenses to date. We will refund you whatever's left over, and you can go find someone else with what's left over. And that's really hard. It's the worst case scenario, but it does also work. Because sometimes you realize this client won't ever get to the finish line, and it's okay to be done. You can have the last 10% of the money left, and that will start the seed money for your next go around with the right vendor for your project.
Well, I can definitely think back on a memory. I won't tell the story, but that example you gave of you can have any color you want as long as it's black. I think of an executive producer that was working for me in my studio, and we had one of those down to the wire. The client's making all these little tweaks and changes, and can you try this and try this and try this? And then all of a sudden we passed a certain time on the clock, and she kept saying, "Oh, that's a good idea. Let me see what I can do." And she would come to the team, we'd make those little tweaks and then show it. And they'd be like, "Oh, that's cool, but can you try the bigger font here and make that bold?" And then over and over and over. And she cleverly, I don't know if it was at 5 o'clock because we had to lay the thing to tape and get it to FedEx. The final request came in. She said, "You know what? That's also a great idea. We'll do that on the next project. This one's shipping." And guess what the client said? "Oh." I mean, sometimes if you're just straightforward, she wasn't awkward about it. She was like, "That's such a great idea. But we're laying it to tape right now and I'm shipping it. So I'm glad you like it."
Yeah, the magic of delivery is really amazing, and working towards delivery and even the moment of delivery. Often when we talk about the term manage your client's expectations, that's one of the greatest expectations that you're always having with a client is that delivery point. We're still on the point for delivery. You're going to make delivery. We'll get to delivery. At delivery, we're done, right? That's the last expectation you have to manage from them. So to the point of your producer's credit is that they recognize we've now delivered. And to announce that and express that, this is delivery. If you want to keep on going, cool, we're going to lock this one up. I'll give you a new budget to make version B for your next release or next week's problem to solve. But this is the one that we've had within the scope and the budget and the promises, and we've met those promises.
You're reminding me, I remember when projects would be awarded and my producers would come to me with the plan to get all the work done. And of course, they're go-getters, right? So they would build a plan called, we're going to start research tomorrow and then design development next week and this and the other. And I would look at them and say, no, that's giving the client way too much time to change their minds. When's the deadline? And they'd be like, well, I said, no, find out when the real deadline is. When does something really go wrong if we don't deliver by this date? And then back up all the work right up against that.
Yeah.
And of course, they would be like, no, that's going to make things so stressful. And I'm like, actually, it's going to make it great because it forces decisions to be made and it puts you in a position, like you said, where delivery becomes a very non-negotiable thing that you can manage against, and it forces you to make decisions stay within scope, stay on brief, all these kinds of things.
Yeah. What I like is just a really clear idea of what the promise is, right? So we're never saying don't meet the promises that you've made. What we're saying is promise something and keep that promise. But that's what we're just being really clear about, is like, yeah, but what I promised you was this amount of work in this amount of time with this delivery date. So if those items shift, you don't have to call out every one of those shifts as an overage and push back on your client. I almost feel like that part of production, I don't like those producers so much that find every possible moment to nitpick on their clients. You really want to collaborate with them, but overall understand what the value is you're presenting and or you're delivering, and then know what that delivery point is. And if you're keeping that in mind, do I give away tomorrow's analogy now? I'm not going to.
No.
I'll preserve it for tomorrow, but it's such a good one. But you have this idea of a target you're going to hit. And as you really get closer and closer to target, you have to be more and more precise on the effort it takes to hit that target. When you're really far away, you're just making broad, major issues, just trying to get as close as possible. So that constant management gets us there. It's what I programmed into the roll-up was that it's that a producer is touching it. Like they're spending the money, they're plugging in numbers. And as much as it feels like it's bookkeeping, what it really is your brain firing where the project is and how close we are to finish, so that you're always re-angling it. So I believe in that meditation over your project over and over again, and pre-visualizing what it takes to get it finished really helps, so that when the unexpected moment comes and a client calls you in or a creative calls you in, you have something clear in your mind, and then you can think off the cuff because I've already processed it beforehand. Instead of not really expecting it, that's where you can jump all over the place. And I think you lose ground, you lose credibility, and you lose control of the project.
Well, did everyone hear the word that Tim used right there? He didn't say if things go wrong, right? He said when. And I think that's a very reasonable word to use in that context, because it's like you said, you're moving forward on the project, you have a plan, but almost as soon as the project starts, you generally throw that plan in the trash because you make a new one. And then you probably make it again and again and again as you go, because there's just so much you don't know. And the parameters are changing. We thought we were going to shoot this thing and it didn't look right. So we now have to go shoot that thing. And you're just, right? Always, what is it? It's kind of like the airplane that's never on course. It's always just like, how much are we?
Yeah, right.
How much are we off course? Okay, can we get it back? Oh, now we're off course the other way.
Yeah, that's what it feels like. The ship that's sailing away from one coast at the other really is always moving in and out of the wind until it finally gets close enough to its final source. That's definitely how projects go. So that navigation is the key, and obviously always checking course, knowing what the correction needs to be, and getting back on course is a part of it. I think one of the things that hurt us most is that we want it to be easy. So we say, yeah, but I just wish it could have been the way I thought it was at first. And I think that thought is the corrupting thought, that you believe that you was going to be there without issues. No, the excitement is because there's going to be issues. I'm going to be there. I'm going to solve them. It's going to be exciting. We're part of the conversation. I'm important. Those are the items that you want to get a hold of instead of recoiling and wish it wasn't hard at all.
Well, maybe there's even a deeper version of that. Maybe we feel like entitled that things should go right? We almost believe deep down inside, well, if the clients would just play nice and not screw things up, it would go according to plan. And I don't know what that is. I don't know.
That's someone that's never raised a kid or trained a dog. That's for sure. Because you learn very fast in life. It never happens the way you want.
Yes, right. Never. Oh man.
Never.
I was going to potentially call on Margot here. I think she dropped off, or at least is just not on camera, because she's one of our producers in the masterclass. I thought I would get her 2 cents on this. Oh wait, you're here. Hey, Margot, are you comfortable if I drag you in for a second? I'm just curious. I saw you nodding earlier, taking notes or something, and I thought,
oh, yeah.
By the way, Margot is one of our A students, and she knows what I mean because she did the homework this morning.
I did. Jumped on
Yeah.
that call.
So what, in this little chat we're having here about this, like managing that 11th hour change, what resonated with you?
Yeah, well, obviously, I mean, we have all that that happen all the time with projects, and I think just one of the tools that Tim, you mentioned that I try to use quite a bit is the talking with the team to figure out like actually what is possible, and then just the having, rather than saying like a no, but just giving them here are two different options. I think that is something I probably don't use enough, but would be very helpful.
Well, to your credit, I'll say this. So Andy, right, the owner at Motion 504, I can't remember the word he used, but it was something like, Margot has this very zen, like just unflappable coolness to her. And I think that speaks to your bedside manner as a producer. And I'm just guessing that is so helpful when you're dealing with clients, because there's just never this default freak out, right? Coming back at them, no matter what the request is.
Yeah, I definitely think that comes into play as well. It's helpful not to, like you're saying, not to get freaked out or like, oh shit, we need to make all these changes overnight, but just looking at like what's feasible within the timeline and scope.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, we're super glad you're part of the class and excited to get into it tomorrow for session number 2. So Tim, any final parting thoughts before we wrap it up?
No, I'll go back to the original thought of just the idea of producer hacks. It's so fun to be in this ingredient and be processing it. I think we talk a lot about sales, marketing, and that kind of work, but the producers have such an important job, and so much of your money is spent across the producer's desk. To be in that mental space and to know the kind of key elements that you're up against and put some skills to it, it's just super great. So Margot, you and the rest of the class, it's so fun to be with you guys. Yeah,
I was going to say, the producers, as I will keep saying over and over again, are the unsung heroes of our industry. But it's also fun for you and I, Tim, and our team to be working with non-owners, like we're working with the producers. So it's really fun to get into the nuts and bolts of this production ingredient, and just the day-to-day, what it takes to get the work done. Yeah, Margot, welcome to the weekly briefing. I don't think you're usually here, so glad you're part of it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for letting me drag you into it. All right, everyone, we are at 29 minutes past the hour, so we're going to sign off. Tim, what's our closing thought? We always say we exist so you can thrive in business, life, and career. Hope that you can hear that in what we're doing and what we preach. So we appreciate you being there, being part of our community. Please feel free to ask us any questions. Put it out there from this video. We love it. And Joel, there was some really amazing chatter. Vincent put some really great information out there on the community this week. Awesome how everyone came together, help him answer some of these kind of big project decisions he's making. So I really do love that part of RevThink in the community. Yeah, I was actually looking for the title of that thread. It was something like, here it is. How have you all handled multiple projects all at once? Bit of a crazy story. So if you've not read that thread, definitely dive into that thread, because amazing how generous these owners that are running really big studios and stuff are chiming in and helping this young up-and-comer solve some of these very practical challenges. So I thought that was super cool. Great testimony to the community. All right, thank you, everyone. This is the weekly briefing. I'm Joel. Tim, thank you so much. Thank you to Margot. Thank you to all the producers that are in the masterclass. You guys all have a good rest of the week, and we'll see you next week. Bye, everyone.